When did you realize your parents considered you a mistake? I was crouched behind the kitchen island at 2:47 a.m., my bare feet freezing against the tile floor, when I heard my mother say the words that would change everything. Sarah, I'm telling you, having Emma was the biggest mistake of my life. The coffee mug I'd been reaching for in the dark suddenly felt a million miles away. My Aunt Sarah's voice drifted back through the doorway, softer but still audible from where she sat with Mom at the dining room table. Come on, Linda. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. Mom's voice carried that sharp edge I knew so well, the one that usually preceded a lecture about my grades or my attitude problem. David and I were done. Finished. I had the divorce papers printed and everything. Then whoops, positive pregnancy test. And here we are, 19 years later, still pretending we can stand each other. I pressed my back against the kitchen cabinet, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. I'd come downstairs for water after another sleepless night cramming for my economics midterm, never expecting to stumble into this conversation. Sarah had flown in from Portland that afternoon for what was supposed to be a fun weekend planning my parents' 25th anniversary party next month. She's a good kid, though, Sarah said, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for Mom's response. Good grades, sure. Dean's list at state. But God, Sarah, the resentment I feel sometimes just looking at her. Mom's voice trailed off, and I heard the clink of wine glasses. They'd apparently moved on from coffee to the expensive Pinot Grigio Dad kept for special occasions. Do you know what it's like to see your entire life derailed in human form? Walking around, eating your food, asking for tuition money. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. Tuition money that I'd begged them to let me take out in loans instead, but they'd insisted on paying because education is an investment in a family's future. Apparently not the kind of investment they'd wanted to make. You could have given her up for adoption, Sarah said quietly. With David's Catholic guilt. Please. Plus, his parents were already suspicious about why we'd been fighting so much. Having a baby fixed everything on the surface. Made us look stable. Made David think we were starting fresh or whatever. The bitterness in Mom's voice was thick enough to cut. 25 years of marriage, and probably 15 of them have been complete hell. I closed my eyes, remembering all those family photos where Mom's smile never quite reached her eyes. All those times Dad worked late into the evening, even on weekends. The way they spoke to each other in clipped, polite sentences like strangers sharing an elevator. So what's the plan? Sarah asked. Keep pretending forever. What choice do I have now? Emma's got 2 years left of college. David's practice is doing well. We've got this whole life built up, and everyone thinks we're the perfect family. The perfect family. I almost laughed, but it would have come out as a sob. That's when I made my decision. They wanted to keep pretending. Fine. But first, everyone was going to hear the truth. I stayed frozen behind that kitchen island for another 20 minutes, listening to my mother systematically dismantle 19 years of what I thought was my life. By the time they finally headed upstairs, Mom complaining about how the guest room mattress was too soft for Sarah's back, I had heard enough to fill a documentary about dysfunctional families. Apparently, Dad had suspected the pregnancy was a trap for the first few months, which explained why he'd been so distant during my early childhood. Mom had postpartum depression that she hid from everyone, including Dad, because admitting it would mean admitting the whole fresh start narrative was bullshit. And my grandmother on Dad's side, the one I always thought didn't like me much, had apparently told Mom point blank that she knew they'd only had me to save their marriage. Rosemary saw right through it, Mom had said with a bitter laugh. At Emma's first birthday party, she pulled me aside and said, you know, dear, children can sense when they're unwanted. I wanted to slap her, but she wasn't wrong. I made it back to my room without making a sound, which was impressive considering my legs felt like jelly. My laptop was still open on my desk, cursor blinking in the middle of a paragraph about supply and demand curves. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was studying economics while discovering I'd been an unwanted expense for nearly 2 decades. Sleep was obviously impossible. Instead, I did what any rational person would do at 3:30 a.m. after having their entire existence invalidated. I started researching. By sunrise, I had 17 tabs open and a notebook full of plans. I downloaded 3 different recording apps, researched the legality of recording conversations in our state, one-party consent, thank you, Pennsylvania, and started a detailed timeline of every family gathering, argument, and heart-to-heart conversation I could remember. The anniversary party was scheduled for Saturday, March 18th. 5 weeks away. Mom had been planning it for months, sending out elaborate invitations to 127 people including Dad's entire extended family, all of their college friends, neighbors, and colleagues from both their jobs. She'd rented the ballroom at the Hilton downtown, the same one where they'd held their actual wedding reception 25 years ago. It's going to be perfect, she told me just last week while addressing invitations. A real celebration of what we've built together. What they'd built. A lie so massive it required a full-time maintenance crew of 2. I spent Sunday morning acting completely normal. Made coffee, asked Sarah about her flight, listened to Mom complain about Dad leaving his dishes in the sink. When Dad came down at 9:30, late for him on a weekend, I even managed to give him a hug and ask about his golf game like I had every Sunday for the past 4 years. Shot an 89 yesterday, he said, ruffling my hair the way he'd done since I was little. Getting closer to breaking 85. That's great, Dad. The casual affection in his voice made my chest ache. This was the man who'd apparently spent months wondering if I was conceived specifically to manipulate him. But he seemed to genuinely enjoy these small Sunday morning conversations. Which somehow made everything worse. Mom emerged from the kitchen with her second cup of coffee and that tight smile she wore when she was trying to seem relaxed. Emma, honey, I was thinking you could help with the party planning. Maybe you could put together a slideshow of family photos. Something sentimental for the big night. I smiled back, matching her fake warmth perfectly. I'd love to, Mom. I have some great ideas for what to include. If she only knew. The recording apps turned out to be easier to use than I'd expected. By Tuesday evening, I had 3 different conversations saved to a password-protected folder on my laptop, each one more damning than the last. Monday's gem came during Dad's usual 6 p.m. phone call to his brother Michael in Phoenix. I'd positioned myself in the hallway outside his home office, phone pressed against my thigh to muffle any accidental sounds. I know it sounds terrible, Mike, but sometimes I look at Emma and wonder what my life would have been like if Linda had just, if we'd made different choices back then. Dad's voice carried through the thin door with crystal clarity. Don't get me wrong, she's a smart kid, makes good grades, never gets in real trouble. But Christ, the financial pressure alone. 19 years of it. Financial pressure. I just submitted my FAFSA forms the week before, and even with their combined income of $127,000 a year, my college expenses were apparently breaking the bank. Never mind that I'd taken a part-time job at the campus bookstore specifically to reduce what I was costing them. Linda keeps talking about this anniversary party like it's going to fix something, Dad continued. Like if we can just put on a good enough show for everyone, we'll remember why we got married in the first place. But all I can think about is how we're spending $8,000 to celebrate 25 years of being miserable. $8,000. For one night of pretending they could stand each other. Tuesday's conversation was even better. Mom was on the phone with her sister Janet in California while folding laundry in the basement. I'd volunteered to help carry the clean clothes upstairs, which gave me the perfect excuse to hover near the bottom of the steps. She's exactly like David when he's in one of his moods, Mom was saying, shaking out one of my sweaters with more force than necessary. That same stubborn streak, that same way of looking at you like you're disappointing her just by existing. I touched my face unconsciously. I did that look thing, I'd caught myself doing it in mirrors when I was thinking. Apparently it reminded Mom of Dad's disappointing expressions. I used to think having a baby would make me feel more maternal, I guess. Like all those hormones would kick in and suddenly I'd understand what other mothers were always gushing about. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Janet, I've never felt that rush of unconditional love everyone talks about. Not once. Not when she was born, not at her high school graduation, not when she made Dean's List last semester. I feel proud of her accomplishments, sure, but it's like being proud of a project you completed successfully, not a person you created. A project. 19 years of pretending to be someone's beloved daughter, when really I was just a long-term assignment they'd both gotten stuck with. But the real revelation came Wednesday evening, when I overheard Mom talking to her therapist during what she thought was a private session in her bedroom. I'd been returning her laptop charger when I caught fragments of the conversation through her door. Told him I made an appointment to discuss options, but I never actually went through with it. By then David had already started telling people, and his parents were so excited about their first grandchild. Options. She'd made an appointment to discuss options. I stood in the hallway holding that charger cord, feeling like the ground was dissolving under my feet. She hadn't just gotten accidentally pregnant and decided to keep me to save the marriage. She'd actively considered not keeping me, and the only reason she changed her mind was because Dad had jumped the gun on announcements. I existed because of a timing problem and social embarrassment. That night, I added a new document to my revenge folder, a detailed guest list for the anniversary party, complete with everyone's relationship to my parents and exactly why each person needed to hear these recordings. 4 weeks and 2 days to go. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Dad's laptop. He'd asked me to help him transfer some files to a USB drive Thursday evening. Emma's better with computers than I am, he'd said with that same affectionate tone that made my chest tight. What he didn't realize was that his email was still logged in when I opened the browser. I should have just done what he asked and closed it. Should have been the good daughter he thought he was raising. Instead, I found myself staring at an email thread from February 14th, Valentine's Day, how fitting, between him and someone named Dr. Rebecca Chin. David, I understand your concerns about maintaining stability for Emma's sake, but staying in an unhappy marriage for the children often creates more psychological damage than a clean divorce. Have you considered that she might actually benefit from seeing both her parents in healthier relationships? Dad's response, sent at 11:47 p.m., Rebecca, Linda, and I have invested too much in this facade to tear it down now. Emma's got 2 years left of college, and then she'll be on her own. We can hold out that long. The alternative is admitting to everyone, including Emma, that her entire childhood was built on a lie. How is that better for anyone? Dr. Chin again, what makes you think she doesn't already know something is wrong? Children are remarkably perceptive about parental dynamics. Your description of Emma as withdrawn and overly self-reliant suggests she may already be compensating for the emotional instability in your home. Withdrawn. Overly self-reliant. I screenshot that email thread so fast my finger cramped. But the real gut punch came in Dad's response from February 16th. You're probably right about Emma picking up on things. Linda mentioned that Emma asked her last month if we were happy together. Linda told her we were just going through a stressful period with work, but Emma didn't seem to buy it. She's too smart for her own good sometimes. Gets that from Linda, unfortunately. I'd asked Mom that question on January 23rd, after walking in on what I thought was just another one of their discussions about money. Mom had been crying, actually crying, not just frustrated, and Dad had been standing by the window with his back to her like he couldn't bear to look in her direction. Are you guys okay? I'd asked. Like, really okay? Mom had wiped her eyes and given me that bright, fake smile. Of course, honey. Daddy and I were just talking through some budget stuff. You know how boring adult conversations can get. But I'd seen Dad's reflection in the window glass. He'd looked like a man at his own funeral. Now I knew why. I printed out the entire email thread, 17 pages of my father discussing our family like we were a failing business he was trying to keep afloat until the lease expired. Then I added it to my growing collection of evidence. Friday brought the most devastating discovery yet. I was looking through the hall closet for extension cords to help set up Mom's new printer when I found a shoebox shoved behind the Christmas decorations. Inside were greeting cards, old photos, and what looked like a journal with a faded pink cover. The journal was Mom's, dated from my senior year of high school. Most of the entries were mundane, grocery lists, appointment reminders, complaints about her coworkers. But the entry for May 15, 2021, 3 days after my graduation, made me sit down hard on the closet floor. Watched Emma walk across that stage today and felt nothing but relief that we're almost done. David keeps talking about how proud he is, how we did good raising her, but all I can think about is how different my life would have been if I'd been braver 19 years ago. Janet's youngest just got into Stanford with a full scholarship, and everyone's celebrating like it's some miracle. I look at Emma's acceptance letter to state and just feel exhausted. For more years of pretending this was all worth it. For more years of pretending I was worth it. I photographed every page of that journal, hands shaking so badly some of the pictures came out blurry. Then I put everything back exactly where I'd found it and went to my room. 24 days until the anniversary party. My slideshow was going to be fucking spectacular. The real game changer came the following Tuesday when Mom asked me to help her go through old photo albums for the anniversary slideshow. We spent 3 hours sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes of pictures dating back to their college days. "Oh, look at this one," Mom said, holding up a photo from what looked like 1997. "This was right after we found out I was pregnant with you. Aunt Sarah took it at the family barbecue." I stared at the picture. Dad had his arm around Mom's waist, both of them smiling at the camera, but something about their body language looked forced. Mom was leaning slightly away from Dad, and his smile seemed more like a grimace. "You both look happy," I lied. "We were trying to be," Mom said quietly, then caught herself. "I mean, we were happy. Just nervous about becoming parents, you know." But as we continued sorting, I started noticing a pattern. Every photo from late 1997 through early 1999 showed the same thing, my parents standing just a little too far apart, smiles that didn't reach their eyes, forced intimacy that looked uncomfortable even through the camera lens. Then Mom pulled out a manila envelope I'd never seen before. "These are from your first birthday party," she said, dumping out a stack of photos. "I always meant to put them in an album." I picked up one of the pictures and froze. It was me in a high chair, cake smeared all over my face, reaching toward the camera. But in the background, clearly visible, were my parents having what looked like an intense argument by the kitchen doorway. Dad's jaw was clenched, Mom had her arms crossed defensively, and neither of them was paying any attention to their 1-year-old daughter's birthday celebration. "Mom, what were you and Dad fighting about here?" She glanced at the photo and her face went pale. "Oh, that. I don't even remember. Probably just party planning stress." But I could see the lie in her eyes. And suddenly I remembered what she told Aunt Sarah about Grandma Rosemary confronting her at my first birthday party. "Can I borrow these for the slideshow?" I asked casually. "Some of them are really sweet." "Sure, honey. Just don't lose them." That evening, while Mom was at her book club and Dad was working late, I scanned every single photo from that envelope. What I found was a visual timeline of my parents' misery during my first year of life. By my first birthday, they could barely stand to be in the same frame together. But the real treasure was hidden at the bottom of the envelope, a folded piece of paper that turned out to be a printout of an email from Mom to someone named Lisa Hendricks, dated March 15, 1999. "Lisa, thanks for watching Emma last weekend. David and I had our first marriage counseling session on Friday, and Dr. Martinez says we need to rebuild our foundation of trust and communication. What he doesn't understand is that our foundation was never solid to begin with. We got married too young, had Emma for all the wrong reasons, and now we're stuck pretending this was all part of some grand plan. David keeps saying we need to make it work for Emma's sake, but I look at other families and wonder if we're actually damaging her more by staying together. She's only 15 months old and already seems to sense the tension in the house. Yesterday she started crying every time David and I were in the same room with her. Even babies know when something's wrong. 15 months old, and I was already picking up on their dysfunction. I'd spent my entire life thinking I was imagining the weird energy between them, but apparently even as a toddler I'd known something was off. I photographed the email and added it to my collection, which now included 43 audio recordings, 67 screenshots, and a detailed timeline spanning my entire life. 20 days until the party. I'd already reserved the hotel's AV equipment under the pretense of helping Mom with technical setup. Soon everyone would know exactly what 25 years of marriage looked like when it was built on a lie. The breakthrough I'd been waiting for came from the most unlikely source, my parents' financial records. I'd been helping Dad organize his tax documents when I stumbled across a folder labeled Emma, Education Fund, tucked behind his filing cabinet. What I found inside made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped the entire stack. Bank statements dating back to 1998 showed a college savings account that had been opened 3 months after I was born. But the deposit history told a story I wasn't prepared for. The account had started with a single $2,500 deposit, then nothing for 6 months. After that, sporadic deposits ranging from $50 to $200, but never consistent, never planned. What caught my attention was a printed email from 2003, paperclipped to one of the statements. It was from Dad to his financial advisor, Greg Morrison. "Greg, Linda and I need to discuss Emma's education fund. We've been contributing when we can, but honestly, we never planned for college expenses when we made the decision to have her. The account currently has $8,847, which won't even cover one semester at a decent school. Linda thinks we should take out a second mortgage to make up the difference when the time comes. I'm wondering if there are other options we haven't considered. Can we set up a payment plan that would minimize the impact on our retirement savings? Never planned for college expenses when we made the decision to have her. They'd spent 19 years acting like my education was their top priority, insisting on paying my tuition because that's what good parents do, when really they'd been scrambling to figure out how to afford a child they'd never actually wanted to raise." I kept digging through the folder. Another email from 2016, right before my senior year of high school. "Greg, Emma's guidance counselor is pushing for her to apply to more expensive schools. Her grades are good enough for places like Carnegie Mellon or UPenn, but the tuition would be $50,000 plus per year. Linda and I agreed that we'd steer her toward state instead. The in-state tuition is manageable, and she'll get the same degree in the end. We just need to make her think it was her choice." I remembered that conversation. Mom had sat me down in August 2016 and explained how state had such a strong business program, and how staying closer to home would let me maintain important family connections. Dad had chimed in about how big schools can be impersonal and how I'd get more individual attention at state. They'd manipulated me into choosing the cheaper option while making me think it was my idea. But the most damaging document was at the very bottom of the stack, a life insurance policy change form from 2019. Dad had reduced his life insurance coverage from $500,000 to $200,000 and added a note in the margin: Emma will be financially independent by the time this matters. No need to maintain higher premiums for her benefit. Financially independent. At 19. While I was working part-time at a bookstore and eating ramen 3 nights a week to keep my expenses down, I photographed everything and carefully returned the folder to its hiding spot. But as I was sliding it back behind the filing cabinet, I noticed another folder wedged even further back. This one was labeled simply legal, personal. Inside were documents I definitely wasn't supposed to see. Divorce papers, dated September 15, 1997, 2 months before I was born. They were filled out completely, signed by both parents, but never filed. Post-it notes were attached to several pages in Mom's handwriting: custody arrangement needs work, property division acceptable, spousal support too low. They'd been ready to divorce. The papers were done, terms negotiated, signatures collected. I found the pregnancy test receipt stapled to the back, dated September 22, 1997, 1 week after they'd signed the divorce papers. A week. I'd been conceived while my parents were literally planning to end their marriage. But what really broke something inside me was the sticky note attached to the custody section in Dad's handwriting: revisit in 18 to 20 years if necessary. Revisit in 18 to 20 years. I was 19. Right on schedule. That night I called the Hilton and confirmed that I'd need access to their sound system 30 minutes before the party started. The events coordinator, Jessica, was incredibly helpful. "It's so sweet that you want to surprise your parents," she said. "The slideshow sounds lovely. Will you need a microphone as well?" "Yes," I said. "I'm planning to make a speech about everything my parents have given me over the years." 18 days until the party. 18 days until 127 people heard exactly what my parents had been saying about their biggest mistake for the past 19 years. I could hardly wait to give them the gift of honesty they'd never given me. The week before the party, I discovered my parents were planning to divorce again, right after my graduation. I found the evidence while helping Mom organize RSVPs in her home office. She'd stepped out to take a call from the caterer, leaving me alone with her laptop open to what I thought was party planning emails. Instead, I found myself staring at a message thread between her and Patricia Chin Martinez, a divorce attorney in downtown Pittsburgh. "Patricia, thank you for refreshing the 1997 documents. As we discussed, David and I plan to proceed after Emma's graduation in May 2024. We'd like to finalize everything over the summer while she's potentially traveling or working internships. The goal is to present it as an amicable decision between two people who grew apart, rather than the truth." The truth. Even now, planning their exit strategy, they couldn't handle the truth. Dad's response was in the thread, sent from his work email: "Patricia, Linda's timeline works for me. I've already started moving assets to the individual accounts we discussed. Emma will be 21 by the time this finalizes, so custody won't be an issue. I assume we'll maintain the current arrangement regarding college expenses through her senior year." Current arrangement. Like I was a business contract they were both obligated to honor until the terms expired. But the email that made my hands shake was from Mom, dated just 3 days earlier. "Patricia, I keep thinking about what you said regarding Emma's reaction to the divorce. You mentioned that adult children often blame themselves when parents separate shortly after they leave home. Do you think we should tell her about our previous plans in 1997? Would it help her understand this isn't her fault, or would it make things worse? David thinks we should keep that information private, but I worry she'll assume our marriage failed because of something she did or didn't do. The irony is that she actually held us together longer than we would have lasted otherwise. Held them together. Like I'd been a band-aid on a severed artery, temporarily stopping the bleeding but never actually healing the wound." I screenshot everything before Mom returned with her coffee and a stressed expression. "The florist just called," she said, settling back into her chair. "Apparently they're having issues with the white roses for the centerpieces. Something about their supplier falling through. That's frustrating," I managed, minimizing her laptop screen. "Do they have alternatives?" "They suggested pink roses instead, but those weren't what we ordered." She rubbed her temples. "I just want everything to be perfect, you know. This party needs to be special. Their last hurrah before the grand finale." Of course she wanted it to be perfect. That evening, I made a decision that would have horrified the Emma from 6 weeks ago. While my parents were at their respective book club and poker night, I went through Dad's phone. His passcode was still my birthday, 1018, which felt like another small knife twist. Among his recent calls, I found 3 conversations with someone listed as Tom, lawyer, that had lasted over 20 minutes each. But the real discovery was in his notes app. A document titled Post-Separation Planning that laid out their entire strategy. "Emma, tell her after graduation ceremony. Emphasize mutual respect and continued love for her. Stress that this is about us growing apart, not about her. Financial, maintain her college support through senior year as planned. Split cost 60/40, me/Linda, to match current income ratio. Living situation, Emma can choose primary residence for holidays/breaks. Both houses should feel welcoming. Timeline, file papers July 1st. Should be finalized by December if uncontested. Both houses. They'd already planned where they were going to live separately. Dad was apparently keeping our current house while Mom looked at condos closer to her job. They'd organized my entire future around their escape plan, and I was the only one who didn't know about it. I scrolled further through his notes and found something that made my chest tight. Conversation with Mike, he asked if I'm worried about Emma feeling abandoned. Explained that we're actually giving her the gift of honesty for the first time. She deserves to see what healthy relationships look like, even if it means admitting ours isn't one. Better late than never. The gift of honesty. From parents who'd spent 19 years lying about everything. 11 days until their anniversary party. 11 days until I gave them an even better gift. I stayed up until 3 a.m. that night, perfecting my slideshow. 27 minutes of carefully curated family photos, each one chosen to highlight the complete disconnect between our public image and private reality. The background music would be The Way You Look Tonight, the song they danced to at their wedding. But the real masterpiece was the audio compilation I'd created. 43 recordings edited down to 18 minutes of pure, unfiltered truth about what my parents really thought of their marriage and their mistake of a daughter. Soon, everyone would hear exactly what 25 years of lies sounded like. The final piece of evidence fell into my lap on Thursday, exactly 1 week before the party, when Mom's phone rang during dinner. "Oh, hi Patricia," Mom said, glancing nervously at Dad. "Can I call you back in about an hour? We're just finishing up dinner." But Patricia Chin Martinez apparently had urgent news that couldn't wait. "What do you mean the judge wants to meet with us?" Mom's voice pitched higher. "We haven't even filed yet." Dad set down his fork and gave Mom a look I recognized, the same one he'd used my whole life when I was about to get in trouble for something. Mom excused herself from the table, but I could hear fragments of the conversation from the kitchen. Preliminary asset review, unusual circumstances, 19-year gap between initial filing and current petition. When she came back 10 minutes later, both parents looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" I asked, twirling spaghetti around my fork with practiced innocence. "Just some paperwork issues with the anniversary party planning," Dad said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." But I'd heard enough to know their carefully orchestrated divorce timeline was hitting snags. Apparently, having signed legal documents in 1997 that were never filed created complications they hadn't anticipated. The court system had questions about why they'd reconciled, whether there was potential fraud involved, and why they were using the exact same asset division agreement from 25 years ago. After dinner, I volunteered to do dishes so I could eavesdrop on their hushed conversation in the living room. "Patricia says if we can't prove the 1997 reconciliation was legitimate, the judge might order a full financial audit," Mom was saying. "Going back to Emma's birth. What does that mean exactly?" Dad asked. "It means they'll want documentation proving we actually tried to make the marriage work. Counseling records, joint financial decisions, evidence that we were genuinely committed parents rather than just going through the motions." Going through the motions. The story of my entire childhood. "We have evidence," Dad said. "We bought the house in 1999. We opened Emma's college fund. We did couples therapy twice, once in '98 and again in 2003. For 6 weeks total over 25 years, David." Patricia says that might not be enough. I scrubbed the same plate 3 times, listening to them panic about having to prove they'd actually wanted to be my parents. "There's something else," Mom continued. Patricia asked if Emma knows about any of this. "Apparently adult children can contest divorce proceedings if they believe the separation will cause them financial hardship." "Emma won't contest anything," Dad said firmly. "She'll be relieved to see us happy for once." "Relief." "Sure, Dad. That's exactly what I'd feel." But Friday morning brought the revelation that changed everything. I was printing out the final guest list for the party when I noticed an unfamiliar name that Mom had added in handwriting, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, +1. Dr. Martinez. Dad's former couples therapist from the 2003 sessions. I found Mom in her bedroom, steamrolling wrinkles out of her anniversary dress, a navy blue cocktail dress she bought specifically for the party. "Mom, who's Dr. Martinez on the guest list?" She looked up, startled. "Oh, she was a counselor your father and I saw years ago. We thought it would be nice to include her since she helped us through a difficult time." "What kind of difficult time?" Mom's hand stilled on the dress. "Just marriage stuff, honey. Every couple goes through rough patches." But I could see the panic in her eyes. They'd invited their former therapist to witness their fake anniversary celebration. A woman who'd have professional insight into exactly how dysfunctional their relationship actually was. That afternoon, I did something that would have terrified me 6 weeks ago. I called Dr. Martinez's office. "I'm Emma Patterson," I told her receptionist. "My parents, David and Linda Patterson, invited Dr. Martinez to their anniversary party this Saturday. I'm calling to confirm her attendance for catering purposes." "Oh, how lovely," the receptionist said. Dr. Martinez was just mentioning how surprised she was to receive that invitation. She said she'd wondered about your family over the years, especially after your parents discontinued therapy so abruptly. Discontinued abruptly. Of course they had. "She'll definitely be there," the receptionist continued. "She's quite curious to see how everything turned out." I hung up with a smile that probably looked unhinged. Dr. Martinez was going to get a front row seat to the spectacular conclusion of my parents' 25-year performance. 6 days until the party. Everything was falling into place perfectly. That evening, I tested the audio equipment one final time in my bedroom, playing back my masterpiece through headphones. 18 minutes of my parents' voices, crystal clear and devastating, explaining exactly what they thought of their marriage and their mistake of a daughter. Soon, 127 people would hear every word. Including the therapist who tried to save them 20 years ago. The Monday before the party, I made a discovery that almost derailed everything. I was in Dad's home office, supposedly helping him find old tax returns for their accountant, when I stumbled across a manila folder wedged behind his desk drawer. The tab read, "Emma, Medical Records 1997 to 1999, in Mom's careful handwriting." Inside were documents I'd never seen before. My birth certificate, which I'd seen plenty of times. Pediatric vaccination records. But tucked between routine checkup notes was a psychiatric evaluation report dated March 15, 1999, when I would have been about 16 months old. Patient, Emma Rose Patterson, 16 months. Referred by pediatrician Dr. James Walsh due to parental concerns about behavioral regression and attachment issues. I sat down hard in Dad's desk chair, scanning the clinical language that described my toddler self like a case study. Parents report that Emma was meeting all developmental milestones until approximately 12 months of age, when she began exhibiting signs of withdrawal and anxiety. Mother states that Emma cries whenever David and I are in the same room and seems to prefer strangers to her own parents. Father notes that Emma has stopped making eye contact during feeding and frequently turns away when either parent attempts physical comfort. The evaluation was signed by Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the same Patricia who Mom had been emailing about watching me during their marriage counseling sessions. Apparently she wasn't just a friend, she was a child psychologist who'd been documenting how my parents' dysfunction was affecting their 16-month-old daughter. Dr. Hendricks' notes were devastating. Emma demonstrates classic signs of emotional neglect and attachment disorder. While there is no evidence of physical abuse, the child appears to have internalized the tension and instability in her home environment. Parents seem genuinely concerned but lack awareness of how their marital conflict impacts Emma's development. Recommend immediate family therapy and consideration of temporary separation to reduce household stress. Temporary separation. When I was 16 months old, a professional had recommended that my parents separate for my psychological well-being. But the most damning part was a handwritten note clipped to the back, follow-up appointment scheduled for April 12, 1999. Parents failed to attend. Phone calls to reschedule went unreturned. Case closed due to parental noncompliance. They'd taken me to exactly one appointment, received professional confirmation that their toxic relationship was damaging their toddler, and then disappeared rather than deal with the truth. I photographed every page with shaking hands, then kept digging through the folder. More medical records, but also something else, a collection of printed emails between my parents and Dr. Hendricks from 1999. March 20th, Dr. Hendricks to both parents, I understand that family therapy feels overwhelming right now, but Emma's behavioral changes are concerning. Children her age are extremely sensitive to environmental stress. The crying episodes and withdrawal you've described are her way of responding to instability at home. March 22nd, Mom's response, Dr. Hendricks, David and I appreciate your concern, but we've decided to handle Emma's adjustment issues privately. We believe the evaluation was premature, and Emma is simply going through a normal developmental phase. We won't be scheduling follow-up appointments. March 25th, Dr. Hendricks' final email, Linda and David, I strongly advise against discontinuing treatment at this time. Emma's symptoms are not typical developmental behavior, and early intervention is crucial for attachment disorders. If cost is a concern, I can provide referrals for sliding scale family therapy options. Please reconsider for Emma's sake. No response from either parent after that. I closed the folder and stared at Dad's computer screen, trying to process what I'd just learned. At 16 months old, I'd been so affected by my parents' marital disaster that I required psychological evaluation. A trained professional had identified their relationship as harmful to my development and recommended intervention. And they'd ignored her completely. I thought about all those times throughout my childhood when I'd felt like something was wrong but couldn't articulate what. The way I'd learned to read their moods and adjust my behavior accordingly. How I'd become self-reliant and withdrawn, the same words Dad had used to describe me to his therapist just last month. Apparently, I'd been trying to protect myself from their dysfunction since before I could walk. For days until the anniversary party. For days until everyone learned what happened when parents chose their own comfort over their child's psychological well-being. I added Dr. Hendricks' name to my guest list research. She was still practicing in Pittsburgh, still specializing in childhood attachment disorders. Maybe she'd remember the Patterson family case from 1999. Maybe she'd be interested to know how that neglected 16-month-old had turned out. Tuesday night, 3 days before the party, I did something that crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I called Dr. Patricia Hendricks. Her office was closed, but I found her personal website and sent an email that took me 47 minutes to write and rewrite. Dr. Hendricks, you probably don't remember me, but you evaluated me in 1999 when I was 16 months old. My name is Emma Patterson, and my parents are David and Linda Patterson. You recommended family therapy after documenting attachment issues related to my parents' marital problems. They never followed up with your recommendations. I'm writing because my parents are celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary this Saturday at the Hilton downtown, and I thought you might be interested to know how your case study turned out. I've spent the past 6 weeks discovering that everything you identified in 1999 was accurate. My parents stayed together solely to avoid the embarrassment of divorce, and I've been living with the psychological consequences my entire life. If you're curious about the long-term effects of untreated childhood attachment disorder, I'd be happy to discuss my experiences. I think you'd find the data fascinating. I sent it at 11:43 p.m. and immediately regretted it. What was I expecting? That she'd remember one case from 24 years ago? That she'd care about some random college student's family drama? Her response was in my inbox Wednesday morning at 6:22 a.m. Emma, I absolutely remember your case. It was one of the most frustrating situations of my early career because your parents seemed genuinely surprised that marital conflict could affect such a young child. I've often wondered about your development over the years. I have to ask, are you safe? Your email suggests you're dealing with significant family stress. If you'd like to talk, I have an opening Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. No charge, I consider it a professional follow-up to an unresolved case. Also, I should mention that your parents' marriage counselor from 2003, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, is a colleague of mine. She's expressed similar concerns about your family dynamic over the years. Dr. Martinez had been talking about us with colleagues. Our dysfunction was apparently noteworthy enough to discuss at professional conferences. I stared at Dr. Hendricks' email for 20 minutes before responding. I'd very much like to meet with you Friday. And yes, I'm safe. In fact, I'm planning to be safer than I've ever been. Thursday brought a complication I hadn't anticipated. Mom found my guest list research. I'd been careless, leaving printed copies of my investigation on my desk when she came to ask about borrowing my steamer for her dress. When I returned from my shower, she was standing in my doorway holding 12 pages of detailed notes about every family member, family friend, and colleague who would be attending the party. Emma, what is this? Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Why do you have Uncle Mike's phone number written down next to knows about Dad's doubts regarding my conception? My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. I was just organizing the guest list for the slideshow. I wanted to include personal details about everyone so I could make the presentation more meaningful. Personal details like overheard Mom tell Janet that I remind her of everything she gave up. Mom's hands were shaking as she read from my notes. Emma, where did you get this information? The moment stretched between us like a held breath. I could lie, make up some story about misunderstood conversations and confused memories. Or I could start the confrontation 3 days early. From you, Mom. I got it from listening to you talk about me like I'm a burden you've been carrying for 19 years. Her face went white. Emma. I know about the divorce papers from 1997. I know about the pregnancy being the only reason you stayed together. I know about Dr. Hendricks and how you ignored her recommendations when I was a baby. I know about your plans to divorce again after my graduation. Mom sank onto my bed like her legs had given out. For a long moment, she just stared at the floor. How long have you known? She whispered. 6 weeks. Since the night you told Aunt Sarah I was the biggest mistake of your life. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Emma, you don't understand the context. I understand perfectly. I understand that I've spent 19 years wondering why nothing I did ever seemed to make you and Dad genuinely happy. Now I know it's because my existence is a constant reminder of the life you didn't get to live. We stared at each other across my childhood bedroom, the room she decorated when I was 7, with careful attention to details she thought I'd love. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. What are you planning to do? She asked finally. I smiled, and even I could hear how cold it sounded. I'm going to give you the anniversary party you deserve. Mom and I sat in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. She kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closing it again. Finally, she stood up and smoothed down her blouse, a nervous habit I'd watched her do my entire life. We need to talk to your father about this, she said quietly. Do we? Because I've been listening to you both talk about me for weeks, and neither of you thought I needed to be included in those conversations. Emma, please. You're angry, and you have every right to be, but making a scene at the anniversary party won't fix anything. It'll just hurt people who don't deserve it. I thought about Uncle Mike, who'd always made sure to ask about my classes when he called. About Grandma Rosemary, who'd apparently seen through their charade from the beginning but kept sending me birthday cards anyway. About Aunt Sarah, who'd listened to Mom's complaints but still drove me to the airport when I needed rides. You're right, I said. A lot of innocent people are going to get hurt on Saturday. But that's not really my problem anymore, is it? Mom's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the frustrated tears I'd seen during their arguments. Emma, I know how this looks, but you have to understand, your father and I, we did try. We went to counseling, we made an effort. You went to 6 sessions over 25 years and quit every time someone suggested you might actually have to change something. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 19 years making me feel like I was the problem in this family when really I was just collateral damage from your inability to have an honest conversation with each other. She sat back down, harder this time. What do you want from us, Emma? What would make this right? It was a good question. What did I want? An apology would be meaningless. They were sorry they'd been caught, not sorry for what they'd done. They couldn't give me back my childhood or undo the years of wondering why I never felt quite wanted in my own home. I want everyone to know the truth, I said finally. I want your friends and family to understand what your marriage actually looks like instead of this performance you've been putting on for decades. And then what? You think humiliating us publicly will make you feel better? I think it'll make me feel honest for the first time in my life. Dad's voice came from the hallway. What's going on in here? He appeared in my doorway, still wearing his work clothes, looking back and forth between Mom's tear-streaked face and my stack of research papers scattered across the bed. She knows, Mom said simply. She knows everything. Dad's expression went through several changes: confusion, recognition, resignation. He leaned against the doorframe like he needed the support. How much is everything? He asked. The divorce papers from '97. The therapy sessions you both skipped. The conversations with Uncle Mike and Aunt Janet. Your emails to Dr. Chin about holding out until I graduate. The financial records showing you never actually planned to pay for college. Should I keep going? Dad was quiet for a long time, studying my face like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. You look so much like your mother when she's angry, he said finally, which was possibly the worst thing he could have said given the circumstances. David, Mom warned. No, Linda, she's right. We fucked this up. We fucked up everything, and now our 19-year-old daughter has been playing detective for weeks because we couldn't be honest with her. I stared at him. In 19 years, I'd never heard my father use the word fuck in front of me. So what happens now? He asked. I looked at both my parents, really looked at them. They seemed smaller somehow, deflated. For the first time in my life, they looked genuinely afraid of me. Now you get to find out what it feels like when someone you trust completely betrays you in public, I said. The anniversary party was in 48 hours. Friday afternoon at 3 p.m., I sat in Dr. Patricia Hendrick's office for the second time in my life. The first time, I'd been 16 months old and crying whenever my parents were in the same room. Now I was 19, and apparently I'd learned to cry on the inside instead. You've grown up to be remarkably self-aware, Dr. Hendrick said after I'd spent 40 minutes walking her through my discoveries of the past 6 weeks. Though I suppose that's a common survival mechanism for children who grow up managing their parents' emotions. She looked exactly like I'd imagined, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her office smelled like lavender and felt like the safest place I'd been in months. The attachment issues we documented when you were a toddler, she continued, they don't just disappear because a child gets older. They evolve. You learn to be hypervigilant about your parents' moods, to anticipate their needs, to make yourself small enough that you wouldn't add to their stress. Is that why I've never had a serious relationship? Because I can't trust that people actually want me around? It's certainly possible. Children who grow up feeling conditionally loved often struggle with intimacy as adults. They expect to be abandoned, so they either avoid relationships entirely or they work exhaustively to be perfect partners. I thought about Marcus, the guy I dated sophomore year who'd broken up with me because I was too accommodating. Or Jenny from high school, who'd stopped calling after I'd canceled 3 hangouts to help Mom with various family obligations. Dr. Hendricks, can I ask you something that might sound crazy? Tomorrow night, I'm planning to play recordings of my parents' conversations at their anniversary party. In front of 127 people. Part of me knows it's cruel, but another part of me feels like if I don't do this, I'll disappear completely. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me what you mean by disappearing. They're planning to divorce after I graduate. They've been planning it for months, maybe years. Once I'm officially launched, they'll finally get to live their authentic lives. But what about my authentic life? When do I get to stop being the reason 2 people stayed miserable? When do I get to exist for my own sake instead of as evidence of their sacrifice? Dr. Hendricks was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Emma, what you're describing, this need to be seen and acknowledged, it's completely understandable. But public humiliation rarely gives us the validation we're seeking. So I'm supposed to just let them throw their divorce party disguised as an anniversary celebration? Let them play the role of devoted parents one more time while they're literally planning their escape? I'm not saying you shouldn't confront them. I'm asking whether you've considered what you actually want to accomplish. That stopped me cold. What did I want to accomplish? I want them to stop lying, I said finally. To everyone, but especially to themselves. And you think embarrassing them publicly will make them more honest? I think it'll make them stop pretending their marriage was some great love story that just happened to produce a child. Dr. Hendricks nodded slowly. Emma, I'm going to share something that might be difficult to hear. Your parents' decision to stay together after 1997, it wasn't necessarily about you. It was about their own fear of failure, their need to maintain a certain image, their inability to cope with change. You became the convenient excuse for choices they were making anyway. That's supposed to make me feel better. It's supposed to help you understand that their dysfunction isn't your responsibility to fix. Not through perfect behavior, and not through public confrontation. I stared out her office window at the late afternoon traffic. People going home to families they'd chosen, families that wanted them there. The anniversary party starts at 7 tomorrow, I said. I've already loaded the audio files onto my laptop. The hotel's AV system is reserved under my name. And if you go through with this, how do you imagine Sunday morning will feel? I'd been so focused on Saturday night that I hadn't really thought about Sunday. Or next week. Or next month, when I'd have to live with whatever I'd destroyed. I don't know, I admitted. That's okay. But maybe that's worth considering before you make a choice you can't undo. Dr. Hendricks walked me to the door, then handed me a business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. Emma, if you need to talk tomorrow night, before, during, or after the party, please call me. This level of family trauma isn't something you should navigate alone. I drove home through rush hour traffic, her words echoing in my head. 24 hours until the party. 24 hours to decide whether I wanted revenge or just to be free. When I pulled into our driveway, both parents' cars were there. Through the kitchen window, I could see them sitting at the table with what looked like a bottle of wine between them. Talking. For the first time in weeks, they were actually talking to each other instead of about each other. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching them through that window, and realized I had no idea what they were saying. For once, maybe I didn't want to know. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, which felt appropriate for what I'd started thinking of as Judgment Day. I woke up at 6:18 a.m. with my laptop still open beside me, the audio files queued and ready. 18 minutes of my parents' voices that would destroy 25 years of carefully maintained lies. But something had shifted overnight. Maybe it was Dr. Hendricks' question about Sunday morning, or maybe it was seeing my parents actually talking to each other for the first time in months. Either way, I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if I really wanted to be the person who did this. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the guy I dated sophomore year. Saw the anniversary party pics on your mom's Facebook. Hope you guys have an amazing night celebrating family red heart. Mom had been posting pictures all week. The elegant invitations, the florist delivering white roses, her and dad trying on their formal wear. To the outside world, we looked like the perfect family celebrating a milestone marriage. Even I had to admit the photos were convincing. I padded downstairs to find both parents in the kitchen, moving around each other with careful politeness while they prepared for the day. Mom was steaming her dress again, the navy blue one that made her look 10 years younger. Dad was polishing his good shoes, the ones he only wore to weddings and funerals. Morning, Emma, Dad said without looking up. There's coffee if you want some. Thanks. I poured myself a mug and noticed they'd made enough for 3 people instead of their usual 2 cups. A small gesture, but it felt significant. The caterer called to confirm delivery at 4:30, Mom said, addressing both of us but not quite meeting my eyes. Emma, did you want to come early to help set up the slideshow equipment? The slideshow. 27 minutes of carefully chosen family photos that I'd selected to highlight our dysfunction. Photos that would make perfect sense alongside 18 minutes of recorded conversations about their biggest mistake. Sure, I heard myself say. I'll need about 15 minutes to get everything connected properly. We stood there in our kitchen, drinking coffee and discussing logistics like we were planning any normal family event. Like I wasn't carrying a laptop full of evidence that could destroy everyone's relationships with everyone else. Emma, Dad said suddenly, your mother and I talked for a long time last night. I tensed, waiting for the confrontation I'd been avoiding since yesterday afternoon. We wanted you to know that regardless of everything you've discovered, we're proud of who you've become. You're stronger than either of us was at 19. Stronger than we are now, honestly. Mom nodded, still not quite looking at me. What your father's trying to say is that we know we failed you in a lot of ways. We're not asking for forgiveness, but we want you to know that any mistakes we made, they were about us, not about you. I stared at both of them. This was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard from either parent in 19 years. It should have felt like victory, but instead it felt hollow. Too little, too late, delivered only because they'd been caught. Are you still planning to divorce after my graduation? I asked. They exchanged a look that lasted several seconds. We don't know, Dad said finally. We're going to try counseling again. Real counseling this time, not just crisis management. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure out how to separate without making it your burden to carry, Mom said quietly. 6 hours until the party. 127 people expecting to celebrate a love story that had never really existed. And me, standing in our kitchen with a choice I'd have to live with forever. My laptop was upstairs, loaded with enough ammunition to burn everything down. The question was whether I still wanted to light the match. The hotel ballroom looked exactly like a fairy tale when I arrived at 4:15 p.m. White roses everywhere, soft lighting that made everyone look 10 years younger, round tables draped in cream linens with gold accents. Mom had outdone herself. It really was perfect for celebrating 25 years of marriage. Too bad it was all built on a foundation of lies. I found Jessica, the events coordinator, setting up the AV system near the small stage where Dad would give his traditional anniversary speech at 8:30. My laptop bag felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I approached her. Emma. So exciting that tonight's the big night, Jessica said with genuine enthusiasm. I have you set up right here. You'll have full control of the sound system and the projection screen. Will you need a microphone for your introduction? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll want to say a few words before the slideshow begins. As I connected my laptop to their system, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. 6 weeks of rage had crystallized into something colder and more focused. Every conversation I'd recorded, every document I'd photographed, every lie I'd uncovered, it all led to this moment. At 5:47 p.m., guests started arriving. I positioned myself near the entrance, watching people filter in with bright smiles and expensive gifts. Uncle Mike flew in from Phoenix, still talking about Dad's golf game. Aunt Sarah brought her new boyfriend, a soft-spoken man named Robert who kept complimenting the decorations. Dr. Rebecca Martinez arrived at 6:23, looking exactly like I'd imagined, professional, observant, slightly uncomfortable. But the person who made my stomach drop was Dr. Patricia Hendricks, walking through the door at 6:31 p.m. I intercepted her near the gift table. Dr. Hendricks. I'm Emma Patterson. We spoke yesterday. Her eyes widened with recognition, then concern. Emma. I have to admit, I'm surprised to see you invited me. I didn't. My parents must have added you to the list after our conversation yesterday afternoon. The implication hit both of us simultaneously. My parents knew I'd contacted her. They knew exactly what tonight was supposed to be. Emma, Dr. Hendricks said quietly, perhaps we should talk privately before. There you are. Mom appeared beside us, radiant in her navy dress and perfect smile. Dr. Hendricks, thank you so much for coming. David and I were just saying how meaningful it is to have you here tonight. I studied Mom's face for any sign of panic or fear, but she looked genuinely happy. Either she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, or something had changed since this morning. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Hendricks said carefully, I should mention that Emma contacted me yesterday. We had a very illuminating conversation about your family's history. Mom's smile never wavered. I know. She told us about your meeting. We're actually grateful she reached out to you, it's given us a lot to think about. Dr. Hendricks looked between us like she was trying to solve a puzzle. And you're comfortable with me being here tonight? Of course, Mom said warmly. Tonight is about honesty. About celebrating what we've learned and where we're going from here. My blood turned to ice water. Mom knew. She knew about the recordings, the slideshow, everything I'd planned. The calm acceptance, the invitation to Dr. Hendricks, the conversation about counseling this morning, it was all part of some larger strategy one hadn't anticipated. At 7:15 p.m., Dad clinked a butter knife against his champagne glass and called for everyone's attention. Friends, family, thank you all for being here tonight. Before we begin dinner, Emma has prepared something special to share with us. 127 faces turned toward me expectantly. The microphone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to take it. My laptop was connected, the files ready, the slideshow cue to begin. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 6 weeks. But as I looked out at all those expectant faces, people who'd driven hours or flown across the country to celebrate my parents' marriage, I realized I had no idea what I was about to unleash. Standing at that microphone, looking out at 127 faces filled with anticipation, I felt something unexpected, clarity. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. When my parents asked me to put together a slideshow for their 25th anniversary, I thought it would be simple. Just collect some photos, add some music, celebrate their love story. I clicked to the first slide, Mom and Dad's wedding photo from 1997, both of them young and genuinely smiling. But as I was going through old pictures and documents, I discovered something important. This marriage hasn't been a fairy tale. It's been real. Messy, complicated, and real. The next slide showed me as a baby, with my parents looking exhausted but determined. Some of you know that my parents almost divorced before I was born. What you might not know is how hard they've worked for 25 years to build something meaningful out of what started as, well, let's call it an unplanned beginning. I caught Dad's eye. He looked terrified but didn't try to stop me. I spent weeks being angry that their marriage began with compromise instead of passion. That I was born into uncertainty instead of celebration. But sitting here tonight, looking at all of you who've supported this family through every messy, imperfect year, I realized something. The slideshow continued, birthday parties where Mom looked stressed, Christmas mornings where Dad seemed distant, family vacations where nobody looked quite comfortable. Love isn't just the fairy tale beginning. Love is what happens when two people keep showing up, even when it's hard. Even when they don't know what they're doing. Even when they make mistakes that affect the people they care about most. I found Dr. Hendricks in the crowd. She was watching me with something that looked like professional pride. My parents didn't stay together because their marriage was perfect. They stayed together because they were too stubborn to quit. And maybe that's not the most romantic origin story, but it's real. And I'm grateful for real. The final slide was from last Christmas, all three of us on the couch, looking genuinely relaxed for once. It had taken Dad 4 tries to get the timer right on his phone, and we were all laughing at his technological incompetence. So here's to David and Linda Patterson. 25 years of figuring it out as you go. 25 years of choosing each other, even when it wasn't easy. And 25 years of somehow managing to raise a daughter who knows exactly what unconditional love looks like, even when it comes wrapped in very conditional packaging. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Uncle Mike whistled loudly. Aunt Sarah wiped her eyes. But the only reactions that mattered were my parents. Mom was crying, real tears, not frustrated ones. Dad looked like he'd been holding his breath for 6 weeks and could finally exhale. Later, as guests filtered out into the Pittsburgh night, Dad found me packing up the AV equipment. Emma, that was, thank you. I still have all the recordings, I said quietly. All the evidence. I could have destroyed everything tonight. Why didn't you? I looked across the ballroom at Mom, who was hugging Dr. Martinez goodbye and actually smiling. Because I realized that being right isn't the same thing as being happy. And I'd rather have messy parents who are trying than perfect ones who gave up. 6 weeks ago, I'd learned I was considered a mistake. Tonight, I'd learned that some mistakes turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to everyone involved. Even if it takes 25 years to figure that out.